Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football every Thursday on Football Daily. And joining me and Henry, he's back from Glastonbury, the prodigal son, Michael McCubbin. How was it?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, really
You're on an
amazing.
Elton High?
On an Elton High, yeah. Can't lie. I welled up a couple of times during that set. Yeah, it was great. It was really good. Very life affirming. Recommend, if you can get a ticket and you can afford one, to go 1 year. It really is worth it. Yeah, had a great time. Actually, and I was thinking about this, I wanted to speak about it briefly because I feel like there are kind of comparisons between the kind of experience that you have at a place like that and the experience football fans have. It felt like, especially the Elton John set, it felt like a bit of a cultural kind of moment, being part of a crowd of 120,000 people. It felt like I've never seen England at a major tournament, especially a big quarter-final or a semi-final, but I felt like that was the closest thing I felt to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It felt, everyone there, people's kind of whole lives almost building up to a moment like that. That's what it kind of felt like. And just all the flags, all the flares.
You saw Frank Lampard on a flag?
I saw Frank Lampard on a flag. I also saw, actually, the best flag I saw all weekend was an England flag, and it was clearly some Brighton fans who had it, and it just said in each white square, Jason Steele for England. And I was just like, you went through all that, you're carrying that flag around all weekend. It's a big effort to undertake to carry around one of those flags all weekend, and you've decided to use it to call for a relatively obscure goalkeeper who most people here won't know who he is, to play for England. So I thought that was quite inspired. So yeah, that and the Frank Lampard ones were probably my favourite. But that was the cool. That is the cool thing as well. It's so many of the flags are just football clubs, and it's nice. It's nice to see, oh yeah, look, some Notts County fans over there, oh, some Barnsley fans over there, some Everton fans over there. So that was cool.
Truly a festival for everyone. I saw Tyrone Mings was there as well.
Was he? Time. Carragher was there as well. I saw, but I didn't. Of
course,
our
esteemed colleague.
Yeah, I didn't bump into him, unfortunately. Fair. But didn't bump into any celebrities there, actually, aside from Joe Tomlinson, of course.
The biggest one.
Yeah.
And Adam Templeman.
Adam Templeman, a celebrity in his own right.
You've got a nice coarseness to your voice, let's say.
I did. 2 days ago, my voice went on Friday morning, and it was I could barely. Yeah, I was struggling from then on. But it's actually come back quite a lot now. But yeah, it is. Yeah, maybe it will be changed forever. Who knows? But how are you boys anyway?
All good. Yeah, Henry, how are you?
Listen, McCubbin, you go away for one weekend, you come back, and Robbie Keane is the manager of Maccabi Tel Aviv.
Really? Okay.
That's
wow.
the kind of
I missed that as well.
That's the kind of madness that's been taking place.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably one of the biggest managerial shifts I've seen in a while. Robbie Keane going to Maccabi, fresh off being Big Sam's assistant at Leeds United.
Yeah.
It's funny how your life can just change in a moment, isn't it? So yeah, no, listen, good luck to him. Good luck to him, absolutely. No, I'm completely fine. We've just been holding the fort. It's really good to have you back, man.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, you have. But you felt fair play. You have been holding the fort, because a lot of people have been off, haven't they? So
they have
good
been,
shift from you boys.
Also, big change for Robbie Keane, because I was reading an article about him in the newspaper the other day. He had some squatters living in his house. He was finding it really difficult to get rid of them. So big change off to Israel. Best of luck to him, and best of luck with the ongoing legal battle as well against them. Worth keeping an eye on. But today, guys, we are going to be talking about clubs that are losing the transfer window, and there are actually quite a few suggestions. But beforehand, we wanted to talk about the kind of breaking news of the week concerning English football, really, or concerning the England captain, let's say, Harry Kane, with Bayern Munich making major strides, Henry, to try and sign him. What do you make of this potential deal, and where do you think Bayern Munich should stop in terms of their bidding? Because he does only have 1 year left on his deal. Do you think they should eventually look at other targets, or do you think they go, Harry Kane's our man?
Well, I think I was reading about this a bit in the Telegraph. I think they're hoping that he's going to push for this. They've said to him, we're willing to do as much as we can, but the emphasis is on Harry to try and push this over the line. And it sounds, from what we understand, personal terms have been agreed with Bayern Munich. I'm not surprised. I think he's a pretty reasonable guy. I think at this point he's desperate to get out. And Daniel Levy has a really big decision on his hands to make, because he is potentially going to miss out on a huge windfall. There is no way that Harry Kane is signing a new deal. And I think Levy has always hoped that he would eventually get to a point where he could convince Harry Kane to extend his deal for a few more years. I think that's why they went for these big managers. That's why they spent a lot of money last summer, but none of it has worked. And I think at this point the conditions are he's not staying. He's not staying any longer. So Daniel Levy needs to make a decision. So I think Bayern are prepared to call Spurs' bluff a little bit on this one. What we understand, Ben Jacobs, CBS, has said Bayern are prepared to go an £80 million offer all in for Harry Kane. Sounds like Daniel Levy wants at least 100 million. Last summer it was 150 million. This summer it's 100 million that he wants. That's obviously too much, I would say, for a striker that's going to be 30 in July, 1 year on his deal. Even someone as prolific as Harry Kane, £100 million is too much, certainly for a club like Bayern Munich that tend to be fairly sensible with their resources here and there. So yeah, I think Bayern should keep going at this. It would be a great move for him, wouldn't it? Let's face it. It looks like Real Madrid are going to go for Mbappe either this summer or next summer. So if he wants to leave now, and there's no way that Tottenham are going to sell to a Premier League rival, then Bayern Munich is his only option, isn't it? And there is definitely space in him for that side. He'd be amazing. I think he'd win some trophies and probably get to some European finals potentially in the next few years. Because that Bayern side, I know they're in a sort of a lull, as it were, but they've got the ability to bounce back fairly quickly, let's be honest. And if they signed Harry Kane, then that is a serious statement of intent. So yeah, I hope that Bayern Munich stick around. It may cost a little bit more money. What do they spend? 35 million pounds on Mane last year in a similar situation. I think it's understandable that Tottenham value Kane at maybe double that in terms of the pure goal scoring that he offers. So yeah, for me, Bayern should stick at this because the player wants to leave, and I think Levy has to come to the realisation that Kane's going to leave as well and should just try and get some money. Because, sorry, one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
I like it.
I know Ange Postecoglou is like, well, they want convincing that Kane's going to stick around. It's only going to be there for 1 year. You can't take a project on the basis that you're going to have a striker for one season. I'm sorry. I think you've made a good point about this in the past. Why not just take the money and invest it in players that they can build for a long-term project with Ange Postecoglou at the helm? What's the point in going, we really want Harry Kane now? All that Kane's going to do is kind of keep them above board for a while, because Kane has played ridiculously well for a player who's been basically held prisoner by a contract. For a guy that's sort of been refused moves, been let down, gentlemen's agreements broken, the fact that he's continued to play as well as he has, he scored 30 goals last year in the Premier League.
Alone,
it's nuts. And I think the fact that he's been such a model professional, a model prisoner, as it were, I think that's what I read in the Telegraph. And I think it's kind of true in many ways. So yeah, I think it's remarkable. Kane will obviously perform for Postecoglou, but he's going to leave. They should take the money now and they should build for a more long-term project, because really having him for 1 year, especially if he's going to be even more disgruntled if another move doesn't go through, I just don't see what the benefit is for Spurs.
Fair enough. And it does feel like Bayern McCubs have been looking at him for a little while. There was talks, I think it was about midway through last season, that he was their top target, and you could see him featuring and working pretty seamlessly along some of the other attacking members of that front line, because there are some great wingers and number 10s there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he does look like a very lovely fit for that team, doesn't he? I think him coming into that side relieves pressure on someone like Thomas Müller, who will be aging out, you'd expect, in the next couple of years. We thought he was aging out before, didn't we? But he has been pretty brilliant, but not playing quite as much football as he was. Jamal Musiala kind of primed to take that more advanced role, isn't he? But I think Kane can just upgrade that attack in a massive way. Choupo-Moting did a great job last year, but he wasn't Lewandowski. Kane in his current form is almost like what Lewandowski used to be, which was like a kind of a centre forward who really could do it all, who could link up play and whatnot. Before he became a little bit more of a pure goal scorer. Kane, has so many facets to his game. But I agree with Henry in that, Bayern should not feel pressure in this. They are realistically the only top club that Tottenham are going to be able to sell to if they're. You
don't think Real Madrid could come in?
If Real Madrid could potentially come back in for him for sure, but at this moment in time, that doesn't seem to be the case, that they can afford. I think what where Bayern actually have an advantage over Real is that Bayern could not sign a centre forward this summer, and they are still favourites to win the league next year.
100%.
If Real Madrid don't sign a replacement for Benzema, then I think it would like Barcelona should probably still be favourites next season, just because they do still have Lewandowski. They've just got a more fully formed attack in that sense. I think Real Madrid will eventually sign a top centre forward, but in terms of Bayern being able to stick at the price point that they've put there and put Levy under pressure. But having said that, like, I don't know whether it is a foregone conclusion that Kane definitely doesn't sign another contract. Like,
really,
he's been he's been turned before, hasn't he? You know, like he really could have left that summer of 2021 for Man City if he'd really pushed for the move, but he decided not to because he was, because he, I guess, had too much pride in himself as a professional and as a representative of the club. He could have pushed for that move if he'd really, really wanted to, I think. And if the first month of the season Tottenham are playing great football and it looks like they're going to get top four again, that Premier League record in his sights, like, I wouldn't be that surprised. Like with most players, I would be like, yeah, for sure. Like, there's no way he needs to win trophies. The Alan Shearer article on him I thought was great as well, like in terms of what he would do in his situation, although kind of with the kind of backdrop of he definitely doesn't want him to catch his record, but nevertheless, like, yeah, I think Bayern are in a strong negotiating position here, and yeah, I think it would be a really great move for Kane. It wouldn't quite be Real Madrid, but in some ways it suits him a little bit more. I think he can potentially cause a bit more damage in the Bundesliga. I think he'll be playing in a more, I don't know. There's just something about Bayern which I think will be nice and settled for him. Like the fans don't quite get on your back in the way they do at the Bernabeu. Less media attention. Like he can kind of just go there and get on with his job. And he's got, and actually, fundamentally, he's just got like a plethora of really good goal-scoring wingers that he can kind of link up with. Whereas at Real Madrid, it's kind of Vinicius and Rodrigo are still developing. Like the likes of Koeman and Sane and Gnabry are very much at the peak of their powers. So yeah, I think it would be a great move for him.
I was just going to say, do you not think after signing that 6-year deal in 2018, do you not think he'll learn from the error of his ways and because he will?
No, he should do, yeah, for sure. Like
12 months time, he has his future back in his hands, and he could go to Manchester United. He could go to another Premier League side. It's not foreseeable that he doesn't just switch to another British side. Do you not think that at this point he's learned the error of his ways with Daniel Levy, that it's just not to be trusted to sign over?
If he signed a new deal, that would be for life. That would be signing it for life. But you are right in that he'll be able to maximise his earnings so much more next summer by moving, because there'll be no transfer fee involved. And we've seen that with Mbappe in the talk with Real Madrid over the last couple of years. Players hold much more power in terms of their wages when it's a free transfer. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of the main show. We are talking about the clubs losing the transfer window so far. Put a tweet out, and Nathan's series of numbers, along with many others, Henry, suggested Milan. It has not been a good summer so far for them.
No, it hasn't. I should, before we delve into this episode, first of all, reacting to your suggestions, and second of all, we talked about Napoli in a pretty similar fashion last year at the start of the summer, and then things turned around and they had a pretty good season, I think it's fair to say. Milan, it's not been great, as discussed Sandro Tonali last week, and kind of what led to that. So I won't go into it too much, but yes, Maldini and Masara removed from their positions in power. They'd been in charge of like transfers, and they were in charge of like the recruitment strategy, but like apparently there was a difference of opinion with the owners of the club, and that saw them go away. And now kind of power has been given into the hands of the CEO Giorgi Forlani and Geoffrey Moncada, who's the chief scout at the club there. So they've now taken on kind of responsibility, and apparently Forlani was the man that led like the Leao negotiations anyway on his contract. So he's been kind of taking more control anyway in this situation. They've sold Tonali to Newcastle. Obviously that's the big piece of business they've done so far. Was it about 70 million euros?
I think it was about 70, yeah.
And I think that is a tremendous fee for a player. And I said last week, and I'll say it again, I won't go out too much, Milan have to be willing to sell from time to time to build up that bank, because they've been a terrible selling club. Bought Paqueta for loads, sold him for half. Their biggest sale since Paqueta was Jens Petter Hauger, who they sold for like a 6 million,
8 million,
profit,
like
and they spent that money on Junior Macias, who's
elite.
Zero sell-on value there.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's the thing. They've now got an extra 70 million euros to spend on players, and that is a war chest for a club like Milan.
And I mean, and the thing is, it's like going into this summer, it felt like they were going to probably have to sell someone like Leao for that kind of money, which is like less than his value, I think. So I think, it is a result. Like Tonali will be a great miss for them, but getting that kind of money for him when you could have been, having to sell your easily most important player in Leao. I think that's good business.
I think there's other Tonalis out there as well. There's not that many Raphaels.
No, absolutely.
And if Tonali was 2 years later down his development and was like the best midfielder in Italy, like maybe it would be like, that seems a bit more fair, or maybe they'd be missing out. But the fact of the matter is he hasn't necessarily developed into the superstar that we kind of expected him to at this moment in time. Like at Newcastle, he may well do, but he's not quite there yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you look at some of their business already, it looks like 20 million euros is going on Ruben's Loftus-Cheek. I know it's not the most incredible transfer, but I think he's going to do a good job there. He's 27 years old. I think he's really matured into his game. He's actually been very useful for Chelsea the last few years. I think he's certainly got a lot more minutes than most of us were expecting. He can play out wide. He can play sort of central defensive midfield. He can play a bit more further forward.
Played as a right back at times.
Yeah, exactly. So he's a very useful player, and I think when he is purring, he's class. And I think just knowing he's got a future there at a club like Milan, he'll have sort of Tomori as well, who's going to have known for a very long time. So I think it's going to be fairly easy for him to bed into the club, and he could be joined by Christian Pulisic, who apparently they're really going in for as well, trying to get him for under 25 million euros. The player's interested in the move. I think that's a game-changing transfer if you get Pulisic.
If he can stay fit is my only thing.
He's just not been given any minutes at Chelsea. He's just been sulking on the sidelines for a while now. I think if you can get him through the door, he's super impressive. We've seen that every time he plays for the USA. He got 47 goals and assists and 145 appearances for Chelsea. The bulk of those actually came in his first season when he was very impressive when he came through the door. There's other interest from Lyon and Juventus, but I think Milan are probably going to beat certainly Lyon and not even Juventus at this moment in time to Pulisic's signature. So, I think they have the potential to make some good steps in the market and use that money from Tonali to really bulk out the rest of the squad, because it's about getting depth. Because we saw at the end of the year that Milan side was just running out of steam, wasn't it? It just didn't have the resources off the bench to really make a difference. You can't just be relying on the who's the Belgian Salamakers. You can't just be relying on him to be a game changer, because it really isn't going to work. They need a new centre forward as well, and these are the names that I was reading that they're interested in. I'll be wondering which one you think is the best one to go for. Mauro Icardi, he's number one. Obviously, has history in Italy, coming off a great season with Galatasaray. Wanda, his wife and agent, posted a picture of a kind of one of those time glass balls in front of like an
hourglass.
An hourglass.
A time glass ball.
An hourglass in front of like some Milan chapel, apparently saying like something could be coming. Luis Openda, Jonathan David. The most concrete talks of Scamacca potentially trying to get him out of West Ham, or for Alvaro Morata, who's just extended his deal at Atletico Madrid, but apparently has a 10 million euro release clause, which Milan would be happy to activate, in all honesty. He just scored 13 La Liga goals, which is one of his best returns ever in a league season, and he's played 4 seasons in Serie A. I don't know why he'd want to move again, in all honesty, at this point in his career.
He loves moving. He's constantly on the move.
It's absurd. Imagine another 10 million going on Morata. I mean, it's just baffling.
He did do well at Juve, to be fair. I think he actually had quite an underrated stint there.
Given that they kind of need to essentially replace Ibrahimovic and Giroud in the long term at least, I don't think like Morata and Scamacca aren't the worst replacements for them. They're not like too dissimilar in terms of what they do on the pitch, but in some ways I think Luis Openda might be the most exciting, just because he's coming off such an electric season, like really hungry. It's kind of the next kind of logical progression in his career, I think, to go to like a very good Serie A club. That would be the one that excites me the most. Icardi, I think, for the soap opera would be my pick, though. I think.
Oh, really?
Well, just for the entertainment value, him like going back into the Milan derby would just be fireworks, wouldn't it? It would be great.
But no, I mean, I agree. I think they are going to be able to attract good players. They've got in Sportiello, a sort of backup keeper, which they've really needed. Let's face it. On a free from Atalanta, they needed to move away from
the end of Tatarusanu.
Yeah, they needed to move away from that. And then obviously there's the bad press around the fact that Marcus Thuram's gone to Inter Milan, and it looked like Sfortesi, he could be going to either Roma at this point, unless Inter can sort something out. So there is obviously a lot of bad noise about Milan, but the summer is long, and I think they're going to be fine. I do think they're going to be fine. They're making good noise with some of the transfer targets that they're going for. I think they're going to have a bulkier squad next season. I do think they're going to be able to compete on multiple fronts. Keeping Stefano Pioli happy is the most important thing, in my opinion, right now, because he's really the glue to that side. With Maldini out the door, he's really the figurehead I think the players are going to be looking to, and they've got Leao as well. So if they can keep these guys happy, I think that Milan, it's not quite as bad as it's all being made out to be.
Fair enough, yeah. I know a lot of Milan's fans, at least the ones on Twitter, are actually sort of turning against Pioli a little bit and think that he's quite... he did some quite rogue stuff tactically last year, particularly changing to a 3 and playing Leao down the middle, which didn't quite come off. And then their change in form really came about when they went back to that 3-2-3-1 or a variation or iteration of that. But yes, I think with Maldini at the door, probably wise to stay solid on Pioli, unless they could get someone like Vincenzo Italiano at some stage, who I think has got a massive, massive future. My Cubs, let's move on to Eintracht Frankfurt. This came in some Švika Nuapane, or Nuapane maybe. But Eintracht Frankfurt have lost some big players.
Yeah, they have. And, similarly to Milan, I guess, there is, the departures kind of have made the headlines, haven't they? At Milan, Maldini and Massara are going, and then Tonali being sold, and those kind of lead people to maybe think negative things, and like the Pioli situation. And Frankfurt, like Ndika has left for Roma for free. Daichi Kamada has left for free, yet to find a club. Milan, hoping to sign him. And they were two of the club's most they were among the 7 most used players at the club last year. Kamada was incredibly important. I mean, both incredibly important to what was, quite a successful season in some ways, not such a successful season in other ways. Oliver Glasner, who was very successful and very well liked there, left after what was, a downturn in form towards the end of the campaign. Obviously, won the Europa League in 2022, let's not forget, but finished 7th last year, which was actually a big improvement on the previous season domestically. But they only won 3 of their final 15 games of the season. They lost the DFB Pokal final. So this is a club that they got to the Champions League last 16. Let's remember, and lost to a very accomplished Napoli team. But, were really in with a top 4 shout, and then just, really dropped off towards the end of the campaign. And most of their business this summer has been just players who were on loan last year or the year before. So Junior Bimbe, who got decent minutes, Knauf, who also got fairly decent minutes, Philip Max, not so much. So on the face of it, not so good. But I think we need to view this current, what's going on at Frankfurt at the moment, as just a bit of a transition into what could be a very exciting future actually for the club. So most importantly, they've managed to keep hold of sporting director Markus Krösche, who arrived from RB Leipzig in 2021 and was linked with the Liverpool position earlier this year before they got in Schmadtke. And was very public in terms of committing his future to Frankfurt when those links were arising around kind of February sort of time. And he's got an excellent track record. Obviously, was part of the Leipzig setup, which is classically been very, very sensible. And since he's come in at Leipzig, he signed Lindstrom in his first summer for 7 million euros. Last year, he got Kolo Muani in on a free. Also got Aurelia Buta, who was a mainstay at wing back, both in on a free. Also secured Mario Götze for 3 million euros. He enjoyed a very successful year. And he's also secured, quite an exciting new coach in Dino Topmüller. He lacks top flight experience. I don't think this is his first top flight managerial job. Where's
he come from?
Well, he was Nagelsmann's assistant at Bayern and at Leipzig before that. So he has worked under one of the most exciting coaches in the game. He also played for Frankfurt, interestingly enough, about 20 years ago, just for one season. But he said, he has a
must have a good relationship with Croatia as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think. Well, that's the thing. I think that I don't know whether they crossed paths actually, because I think
Maybe
Croatia might have.
Did he come to Leipzig after Nagelsmann and left?
Yeah, actually, no, I might be wrong there. I think they might have crossed paths at Leipzig. So yeah, and either way, they both come from a similar school, I guess, in terms of the kind of setups they've been with. Both worked with Nagelsmann, I guess. So sorry, that's it. I think that's it. Sorry, I think Topmüller came into Leipzig as Nagelsmann's assistant just as Croatia was leaving.
Gotcha.
So you're right. So, but yeah, either way, there is shared ground there. And there are also some really other exciting young signings who have come in. So 21-year-old centre-back William Pacho has come in from Antwerp, the Belgian champions. He was their most used outfield player last year, despite being only 21 years old. Played the entire season. I think he didn't miss a game, in fact, after August, because the Belgian league kind of started a bit earlier in July. Didn't miss a game after August, and played pretty much all his minutes alongside Toby Alderweireld. So a season playing alongside, one of
a Belgian great, really.
A Belgian great, one of the most impressive kind of ball playing centre backs really of the last kind of 15 years. So yeah, arrives with a lot of experience, despite being so young. Also got in for a similar fee, Hugo Larsson from Malmo. Was he the guy that you were hearing lots of things about when you were in Sweden? Or was that
man on the
else?
ground again.
Yeah, I feel like was he or was it someone else? But either way, he won the Young Player of the Year award in Sweden in 2022. He looks like a really interesting prospect. Actually, I was reading a kind of German report on him, and they were comparing him to Rodri. And you can kind of see it. He's quite a kind of tall, fairly lean, kind of defensive midfielder / kind of, he can probably play as an 8 as well, which kind of suits the kind of the kind of central midfield pairings we've seen at Frankfurt in recent years. Although I'm not sure what Topmüller is kind of going to do with that, whether he's going to do away with wing backs or whether he's going to whether he'll kind of carry on in a similar vein to Glasner. But yeah, Larsson looks really interesting. He's already got 61 senior appearances under his belt. He's only just turned 19. He's got Sweden caps too. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how he fits in and how he adapts to the Bundesliga, because he does look a little bit one of those midfielders where it looks like he looks like he's almost about to lose it all the time, and then just gets that foot in, which can be a really useful skill because it's great at drawing players in. But it does make me think, does he need to actually just improve his touch? It's one of those ones. He looks a little bit clumsy, but is very entertaining and can drive a bit. I think his passing in particular is very good at breaking up play. So yeah, one to watch for sure.
It was Jordan Larsson.
Was it Jordan Larsson?
Son of Henrik Larsson.
Okay, fair.
Who's just got relegated to a Schalke and I think has gone to Copenhagen or something like that. So
fair.
fingers crossed that this Larsson has a better time of it.
Yeah, hopefully. But yeah, so and Croatia seems to be very into these players as well, as he would be having identified them. So those are the kind of main headlines in terms of players who've come in and young players as well. And I think that's the thing. When Croatia came in 2021, it was not his side, right? And he managed to the club managed to adapt to Kostic leaving last year very, very well. The Mawani signing was huge. But it was still the previous incarnation of Frankfurt, just with a few tweaks. Whereas I feel like with these young signings coming in, Croatia is really making his mark on the club. And also they've given themselves a great negotiating position with Mawani. They could genuinely get 80-85 million pounds for Mawani this summer, and they could afford to be no, we're not going to sell him for anything less. They can afford to do that because strikers are so in demand this year. And Mawani, I'm sure, would love a move to a top club, but equally, his value could go up even more next year if he has another great year. So yeah, all things considered, I think they're, I don't think Frankfurt have had a too bad a sign so far. Robin Koch looks like he could come in on loan from Leeds as well. They've got centre forward Omar Mamouche from Wolfsburg on a free. Didn't have an amazing year last year, but I think
there's been useful in the past.
Yeah, there's confidence that he can kind of bring something different to that attack. He's quite versatile, and yeah, I guess under the right coaching as well, I think his numbers could skyrocket. So yeah, I think there's reasons to be cheerful. But yeah, I think the key is getting that Mawani situation, either getting in a kind of like for like replacement with him, or someone who can produce at the level he did last year, get them in kind of just in case. And maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's what Mamouche is. I'm not sure, but either do that or maybe just get that kind of business done, and then have that money that they can kind of rebuild other areas of the team with. But yeah, I'm relatively hopeful for Frankfurt next year. I think the thing is, I think people can't expect them necessarily to get top 4 next year, but the way that the Bundesliga is, like, you never know, they could challenge. But like, yeah, that shouldn't be the expectation in this next year. I think like with a relatively inexperienced manager coming in, I think a top half finish would be great for them. There's still 2 months left of the transfer window. A lot can happen. So far I think they've dealt with it well. Obviously they would have loved for Ndika and Kamada to stay, but Kamada's been there I think since 2017, maybe. I think it is, in some ways it was time for him to leave.
4 or 5 years as well, so they've definitely done their service. I think it'll be really interesting what happens with them. I mean, fair play, that's a lot of new signings coming in, a lot of youngsters coming in. I think German clubs are generally a bit more brave with their managerial appointments as well. Like Frankfurt, Europa League winners the season before last. If that was a top 6, top 8 Premier League club as well, they wouldn't go for someone that's not got any top 5 league experience. It's the same with Bayer Leverkusen getting Xabi Alonso. Like, that was potentially a bit of a risk, but these top German clubs are a little bit more prepared to take a gamble, and I think the league is more exciting for it. It's not just the same names going round and about, although having said that, there is a lot of that merry-go-round going on at top German clubs as well, so maybe I'm talking a little bit of rubbish. Right, let's move on to Villarreal, because they actually had a really good season last year under Quique Setien. So they lost Unai Emery in around October time when he went to Aston Villa. And I think most people thought Quique Setien, he's been out of the game a long time. This is going to be a real struggle. But they finished 5th. They were a decent amount of points back from Real Sociedad in 4th. But they finished the season really strongly. They only lost 3 of their final 16 league games. They beat Real Madrid, Athletic Club, and I think Real Sociedad in that run as well. So they finished the season strongly. But the summer has just not started in the best possible fashion for them. They have lost Nicholas Jackson, and we have talked about this signing on a few of our other shows. Not potentially a massive disaster. €35 million release clause. That's a decent amount of money for a club like Villarreal. But at the same time, he did finish the season exceptionally strongly. Like, he wasn't really their main man until about April time, and then an injury to Gerard Moreno, and he had a few injury issues himself, meant that he was thrust into the sort of spotlight, as it were, and he got 9 goals and 2 assists in his final 8 games of the season. Chelsea saw that. I mean, they probably had their eyes on him for months before that, but saw that, thought, this is a guy that can contribute. Whether he's going to be Chelsea's starting striker next season, I've got my doubts, but a useful player, clearly a high potential player as well, not for a massive fee as well. So it'll be interesting to see his role at Chelsea next term. Villarreal still have Gerard Moreno, but I think he's way over 30 now. Well, maybe he's just over 30 actually. They've got Jose Luis Morales, who can play centrally as well, but he's 35. There was a lot of talk about Ben Brereton Diaz going to Villarreal on a free, but that's gone a little bit quiet. I don't know whether you guys have got more information about that. Let me know in the comments down below. He's been pretty solid for Blackburn. He had a great year the year before last. I think last year was still pretty good. I think it was around 16 goals in about 50 games in all competitions. So that's pretty solid. But apparently the exits aren't done there. Their CEO, Rog Nogueres, I'm probably mispronouncing that, said they might be forced to sell Samuel Chukwueze, who's been interesting at Milan in the past. I don't think Milan would sign him and Pulisic, so it'll probably be a toss-up between the two. But he said, if we don't lower the wage bill, we are forced to make a profit from player sales. Pau Torres has also been linked with a number of clubs, including Bayern Munich, which I find a little bit confusing, given the fact they're also signing Kim Min-jae. But most notably, Aston Villa actually apparently leading the race for Pau Torres. I think that's probably his level, to be honest. I'm not sure Pau Torres is an elite Champions League centre-back. I think he's a little bit lightweight, but clearly, excellent on the ball. Actually a massive frame, but just I think he can get bullied a little bit. But either way, he looks like he's going to leave. And then Dani Parejo has now been linked to Barcelona as well. Either as one of those, another attacking midfielder, and the speculation that he might even be used in the Busquets role, which I think is kind of mental from Barcelona, to be honest. But at the same time, he wouldn't be a big transfer fee. His wages would probably be just about swallowable, for want of a better phrase. But he's, I think, the same age as Busquets. He's not particularly quick. He's not particularly mobile, but excellent on the ball. So as a immediate stopgap for a season, maybe it's not the worst idea. But that's a lot of change at Villarreal. This is their star striker from the end of the season. That's Dani Parejo, their captain and probably best player over the last few years. Samuel Chukwueze, their most exciting young talent. That's an enormous amount of change. And for a club that's been on such an upward trajectory over the last few years, winning a Europa League, reaching a Champions League semi-final, it's just a bit of a shame to see it potentially come to a bit of an end. So Villarreal, definitely a club to keep an eye on. Henry, we've got numerous other suggestions down here, including Lens, Borussia Dortmund, Feyenoord. Who would you like to talk about next?
Yeah, I think Lens is quite a heartbreaking inclusion, and probably quite true. This comes from @NickReed84. I mean, talk about going from big high to a big low. They finished second last season, 1 point behind PSG, an unbelievable campaign. They actually did win Ligue 1, I think, at the turn of the century, but since then, this is easily the best season. I mean, stunning performance. Third best defence in Europe. It's top 5 leagues behind Barca and Napoli. And yeah, you're going to get your clubs interested in your best players, but the other half of you hopes that because they've got Champions League football, because they're clearly going up and up, that maybe players want to stick around for at least one more season. But yeah, the most devastating potential loss, it looks like, Al Nassr, Saudi money is coming in for Seko Fofana, their captain. Yeah. And this is really sad because, I mean, it could even be live before it goes out because he's such a good player. He's been amazing. He was almost in our team this season, wasn't he? Last 2 campaigns, he's been epic. Did that big kind of contract renewal on the pitch where in front of all the fans was really special.
I got goosebumps.
Yeah. Ranks in the top 5 of midfielders for non-penalty XG, shots, progressive carries, touches in the box, progressive passes received. Really all-action midfielder, and you really want to see him in the Champions League. You want to see him in the Champions League playing for Lens, showing what he can do, and it looks like now he's going to go to Saudi Arabia. And look, it is what it is. He's going to go and get Lens are going to get a big old fee for him. 45 million euros is what's kind of being bandied around. He's going to go and get probably career-changing, life-changing wages. Certainly wages that Lens wouldn't be able to afford to him. Whatever. If that's what he wants to do, who am I to say otherwise? It's just a shame to see it. And then if they go on and lose Openda as well, we mentioned him at the top of the show, potentially going to AC Milan. Apparently he's trying to push for a move to RB Leipzig, which I think would be a brilliant signing for them, wouldn't he, really? Apparently he's already visited the club. He wants to go there. I can see why. It's a good team. A good team to join. Certainly for someone like Openda, who probably got maybe a few more levels to him. I think Leipzig would be a great step right now. That said, once again, he's only been at Lens for 1 season. You want to see what he can do in the Champions League after being so successful. And then Facundo Medina, that's another one as well. 24-year-old Argentine. 2 goals, 4 assists last season. Been there for 3 seasons now. Ranks in the top 2% of centre-backs for assists, passes attempted, progressive passes, progressive carries. I mean, he's like the linchpin to Francais's defence, isn't he? He's the one that really gets it going. And I've really enjoyed watching Lens last season. And yeah, it's just replacing these guys and being able to compete at the same level that they are now is really, really hard for Lens because they still can't offer the kind of wages, really, that they'll need to get these top players. They'll need to produce some unbelievable recruitment this summer to maintain another Champions League push next year. I think Marseille are going to be right at it again next season alongside PSG. I think Lyon are probably going to have finally a good campaign again, although their president's been moaning about Saudi Arabia trying to pinch all of their players as well, which was quite good. So yeah, I think it's going to be tough for Lens next season. They've had such a good time of it the last two years, and I just wanted to see this side go again for one more campaign. It doesn't look like it's going to be that way, and I really am not sure they're going to be able to bring in... Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't know. I'm not an unbelievable scout of the lower French teams. Maybe they've got their eyes on a few players, but it's going to be difficult to replace the talent which they're losing this summer.
Yeah, 100%. And they just don't have the same historical pull as other clubs in Ligue 1, let alone in Europe. So the top players that they might be cash flush after these sales, but to attract players to Lens. And it's also a bit of a shame because Lens could draw, a reasonably difficult Champions League group next year, and after losing these players, it might struggle, and then it just reflects badly on Ligue 1, which I think is a little bit unfair because they were brilliant last year, as you so rightly point out. Cubs, let's talk about Borussia Dortmund. This comes in from he_football. Big changes going on at Dortmund.
Yeah, massive. I mean, Jude Bellingham, it was always likely he was going to leave, wasn't he? I think, they did get a great fee for him. 103 million euros is a brilliant fee for a player who they invested in very early. Was so key to them ever since joining, and almost fired them to the Bundesliga last year, didn't he? But yeah, it felt inevitable he was going to go. It kind of, the Real Madrid move felt a little bit inevitable as well. But I think it's just kind of everything. Well, it's the fact that Dahoud's also gone to Brighton as well after running down his deal. They're just threadbare in midfield now. Edson Alvarez apparently has agreed personal terms with the club, and that's a brilliant signing, I must admit. But they do need more bodies in that midfield. Yeah. I personally don't think Emre Can is the guy to kind of lead that midfield forward personally, although I do like him as a player. But I think if you're wanting to challenge for the Bundesliga again, which feels unlikely in some ways, but if you do, you need to have another real kind of another top class midfielder in there who can also be a bit of a leader as well, I think. And I think Edson Alvarez will do wonders for them in terms of their susceptibility to the break, but they need someone who can also drive forward in that midfield. Unless you were to bring Brandt and make him the kind of advanced midfielder, that is a possibility, but in some ways I quite like him being on the right. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they do things. But nevertheless, Bellingham, a huge loss despite the big win. Rafa Guerreiro on the left, as of course.
Your rivals.
Sorry?
To your rivals.
To Bayern as well. Is pretty rough. And weirdly, actually, I think he's the first Dortmund player since maybe Lewandowski to have made that jump, or Hummels. No, Hummels went before, didn't he? For all that talk, actually, is. In the last few years, it's actually quite unusual for players to do that.
Before Lewandowski, Hummels, and Götze, I don't think it was regular. It wasn't a regular thing.
It just kind of
happened a lot in a
happened in a flurry, didn't it? Yeah. And that was kind of sad to see. I was kind of hoping that Guerreiro might have, maybe Man City would have come in for him, or Bayern is still a great move,
or Newcastle
for a player who wants to win trophies, etc. But it would have been cool to just see Guerreiro move to another a superpower that wasn't Bayern, essentially. Try himself out in another league. But nevertheless, good move for Guerreiro as long as he can play every game at Bayern. I think that's the thing as well. There are other clubs who I think were crying out for left backs rather than Bayern, who I think Alphonso Davies is still absolutely brilliant. But who knows? Maybe he'll be used in midfield there. So there's stuff that has needed to be filled. Benzabaini, I think, is a good free transfer. He can play at centre back and at left back. So I don't worry about their defence too much. But it's just, I think in terms of where they actually got themselves to last year, a whisker away from winning the league, and throwing it away in that final game. There needs to be in the next month a real push to get some serious talent in there. And I'm trying to think who I'd suggest in that midfield, to be fair. Someone like kind of Orkun Kokcu, who went to Benfica, someone who is able to do kind of multiple facets of the game. In midfield, someone like Seko Fofana, even, we were kind of mentioning them in the same breath, weren't we, when we were talking about our teams of the season. Those are both kind of Dortmund kind of players, players, picked up from, kind of middling clubs, or overachieving clubs who want to take their career to the next level. Those are the kind of players that they should be targeting for sure. And I guess Edson Alvarez fits that mold, but they do need. They need a real driving number 8, I think, to really drive that attack, because I think without it, you're far too reliant on those wingers, and I think the wingers that they have, they're inside forwards, really, aren't they? It's like Donyell Malen, Karim Adeyemi. They can do a job. They can, and Mokoko's just too young, really, isn't he? Still, he's great. And also has had injury problems as well. Haller, I think will have a full season from him will be great. I think he could get 15 to 20 goals in the league. But you need someone driving it, because their attack is very, it's a lot of goal scorers in that attack. And then you've got Brandt, who is really the only specialist creator. So you need to have that kind of number 8 who can kind of do a bit of everything to really stitch that team together, and I'm sure they will be looking at that. But so far there haven't been so many noises about who that's going to be. I don't know if you guys would have any suggestions. My mind's got a bit blank.
Well, they've been linked with Conor Gallagher, and I don't really like that signing, to be honest. I just don't think I just think he's a rubbish version of Jude Bellingham in every area. I don't mean to say he's a rubbish player, but compared to Jude Bellingham, they are in a different league. Technical ability, their ability to retain possession, out of possession. I think Conor Gallagher would be good for.
He's quite a transitional player, though, Conor Gallagher, isn't he? So I feel like he might suit the style of play.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to turn into more of a counter-attacking side or a team that aren't going to dominate possession or try and dominate possession, then yes, he can probably work. But I just think he's best playing in a kind of 10 role in a very high pressing team. Basically, that Crystal Palace role, I think, was the perfect system for him. In a side that are going to see more of the ball, that needs to thread the play between defence and attack and drive forwards and link up play effectively and cute passes. I just don't think it's Conor Gallagher's game.
I think they should go for Alex Scott at Bristol City. I think they should go for the Championship Young Player of the Year. One of the great attacking
Friend of Football Daily.
Friend of Football Daily. Why not get another exciting young British talent in and see what happens?
Okay, there we have it. Okay. Alex Scott to Dortmund. Right, let's move on to Feyenoord. Just do this briefly because Nathan Wesley's suggestion is a good one. But as Makub says, Orkun Koçu has already gone to Benfica in a €25 million move. He played as a defensive midfielder last year, a bit in central midfield as well, but his goal output was amazing. 12 goals and assisted 5 in 46 games. He ranked second in the squad for shots, created 49 more chances than anyone else. So that is a big ask. And the player they brought in to replace him, I don't know a lot about, really, is called Ramiz Zarouki. He's from FC Twente. He was brought in for €7.2 million. More of an out-and-out DM, close to 5 tackles and interceptions per 90. But they need to add more firepower if they want to push on again and retain the title under Arne Slot. It's great news that he's chosen to stay at Feyenoord, but they will need additions there. They've also been linked, their striker Danilo has been linked with the move to Rangers as well, which is quite an interesting one. Not their top scorer last year, that was Santiago Jimenez, the Mexican striker that everyone's getting pretty excited about. But Danilo scored, I think, 10 goals. He's been linked to the move to Rangers. So if he leaves as well, that's 2 heavy contributors in terms of goals last year that need to be replaced. The good things about Eredivisie sides is they are so used to losing top talent. They nearly always have a plan, and they would have known Koçu was going to go for a long, long time. Henry, we've got FC Porto down or Toulouse. Who do you want to talk about?
Yeah, Porto's just interesting because I was thinking surely, apparently they need to make €50 million in player sales by the 30th of June, and that could mean that...
by tomorrow, by the way. Someone's going... We're filming this on Wednesday. Someone might be going
Well, it seems a bit silly, but I mean, the point is, I had a look at their transfer marks history. Other than 2016-17, they make profit every single year, and comfortable profit, which makes me wonder, they must be spending so much on their youth teams, and they get to the Champions League knockout rounds as well, which is obviously a big windfall too. So it just fascinates me that they would be in a situation where they need to make money.
With FFP,
yeah, exactly. When like Benfica, they're kind of like a machine designed to make money. But I do think Toulouse's suggestion from Trav Leveson, it kind of ties in with what I said about Lens. They had such a good season. They win the Coupe de France. A historic moment in their history, but then they go and lose their best player, Branko van der Boomen, who I know you're a huge fan of. He's gone to Ajax on a free transfer. Stijn Spearings, he's gone for Lens for free. So there we go. Lens have signed someone. And then Reece Healey, he's joined Watford for free. He didn't really feature much last year, but got 35 goals in 2 Ligue 2 seasons before that. And then they're all about data recruitment. So this is the thing. They could bounce back. You never know. And I was looking at the signings they've made. Ibrahim Sissoko from NEC in the Netherlands, €3 million. He only played 800 minutes last year and scored 2 goals. So clearly they've seen something that we haven't. And then Cesar Galabert from Mirandes in the La Liga Segunda. I'm not going to pretend I know much about him, but he came through the Real Madrid Academy, scoring goals from midfield for Mirandes last season, who finished pretty low in the league in La Liga dos. So this is the thing. You just don't know. You just don't know who Toulouse are going to produce. But they've got the Europa League next season. They've got reasons to kick on again. Like I said, Damien Comoli is in charge of them. He's no slouch. He's been around the European game for a long time now. And you want to see them kind of continue their growth because they were a really fun side last season, Toulouse. They punching well above their weight. Owned by Redbird Capital. So they do have kind of smart backing behind them. What are you two giggling at?
Sorry, I just held in a sneeze. I held in
And
a
he went
sneeze.
so red.
Yeah,
You're like that guy in Charlie at the Chocolate Factory that ate that blueberry pie.
McCubbin's gone red in the face at Toulouse's downfall.
Very much so.
He went to lose his colours.
I've gone Redbird Capsule.
I know absolutely nothing about Ibrahim Sissoko, but that is a great footballer's name. It just sounds like he will be good in a few years.
So
I really back him to get a move to like Gladbach in 2025 or something. But guys, those are our shouts for clubs losing the transfer window so far. Admittedly, the transfer window has only just begun, but there were enough shouts in there to make a good video, or so we thought. So, guys, who do you think is losing the window so far? McCubbs needs to recover from his hay fever spent time in the Glastonbury fields. But let's move on to some quickfire questions. Our quickfire question today didn't actually come in from anyone. Please, guys, when I ask for quickfire questions, please send them in. But Henry came up with a good one, which was, if Barcelona have to sell a midfielder, who should it be? Now, as we talked about, they brought in Gundogan. They brought in, well, they're looking supposedly at Dani Parejo. But Henry, there is a situation where they need to sell potentially Frankie de Jong. There's been talk about Frank Kessie. What's going on?
Yeah, well, apparently they suddenly need to sell a midfielder to kind of comply with regulations, which is a surprise. They've gone in, given Gundogan big wages, and suddenly...
Was this from a legitimate source, though?
Well, it's from as much of a source as any of them the stuff we get from, which is...
Is this from Henry's brain?
No, this from Twitter. No, it's from Twitter.
Okay.
I've been reading about it. And then Frank Kessie has been linked with Al Hilal, because there are going to be numerous bodies in that field. And then we're seeing that Frankie de Jong could potentially be available if a big money move comes in. And I guess the question was, like, if you're Barcelona and you're weighing up and you need to sell one of these midfielders, which one would it be? That was ultimately my question.
See ya. Came in for free. If you can get a fee for him, great.
Yeah, I know, especially from if it's Al Hilal, like they'll probably offer like decent money for him. There's something about de Jong though, like I think if he's not going to be trusted to be the Busquets replacement, I kind of feel like de Jong might be the way to go. I know he loves
bigger money.
It's just bigger money, and I think like if Xavi doesn't fully trust them, then who is? Like, he is a brilliant midfielder, one of the best in Europe. On his day, has not had as good a time at Barca as many would have hoped, especially at this point where he's been there since 2019, so he's been there 4 years now. And the longer that he stays there and doesn't get, and isn't one of their most important players, then his value is only going to decrease and his contract's going to run down. I kind of feel like if Barca are ever going to sell de Jong, it has to be this summer. And given how they treated him last year, there needs to be like a definitive decision on him. It's either you are long-term key player at this club, or we're going to sell you. And that's gonna, be it. And it's obviously it's about like who, if anyone comes in.
He's built his house though.
Sorry,
he's built his house over
there. Has he actually built a house?
Yeah, that was the reports last year.
And like I don't know what like actually goes on behind the scenes. But like I thought the way that he was treated last year was terrible last summer. And he has been important. He has been important to them at points, but like he's still not been. That player that they bought in 2019 was supposed to be the guy who the midfield was built around. And if after Busquets leaving, they've brought in Gundogan and they want to bring in Parejo, another kind of short-term replacement for Busquets. I just don't, if I'm de Jong, it doesn't fill me with joy about like my long-term prospects at the club. And I think for both the club and player, this summer needs to be the one where basically his long-term future is decided, whether that's staying at the club and being a being a guy who that midfield is built around, or at least someone who is going to be linking up with Gavi and Pedri on a weekly basis, or whether he cuts his losses and goes elsewhere. The
relentless speculation for a player that last year he was one of their better players. Apparently he was in contention for player of the season. The fact that there's so much speculation always about de Jong, I know he's on massive wages, which really they want to reduce, but, and as you said, McCubbin, treated horrifically last season, almost being pushed out the door. I think at some point something's got to give, and unless he's really taken in and been told that you are a star of this Barcelona side, I think they do have to consider selling him, and I think they got a good offer, 70 million euros, something around in that region, then I think it'd be smart just to maybe cut their losses with De Jong. But I still think he's an amazing midfielder, and anyone would be lucky to have him. But it just makes no sense to me that this guy's constantly having his future linked in the press.
Yeah, I feel like there was a bit of a sea change in the last 6 months though. Like I think he played more games than any other Barcelona midfielder last year. And yes, Pedri had injury issues, and Gavi was still, adapting and actually had a couple of injury issues at various points as well. But I think in the last 6 months, I think every quote that I've seen Xavi say about him has actually been quite positive. But I agree with you. The papers carry on rumbling. I feel like Kessie's much more realistic.
Yeah.
And I think that just makes immediate sense, because if you can get 25 million euros for him, that covers 2 years of Gundogan. So
What a shocking turn that'd be for Kessie if after leaving Milan on such a high to have one bad year at Barcelona and go to Saudi Arabia. I mean, that's a shame.
That is the life we lead in 2023. Guys, who would you sell if you were Xavi and you needed to sell a midfielder? Let us know in the comments down below. And that's all we've got time for on Continental Club for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We've actually got a Explained coming out on Jude Bellingham on Saturday, so get excited for that. McCubs, you've been a bit out of the loop, but Henry, what would you recommend?
I would go have a look at Monday Vibes this week if you've not been tuning into our new show. What were we talking about? We're just looking at all
Timber.
all the transfer speculation.
Rice. The Rice deal is done, McCubs. Hopefully.
Well, maybe. Let's see.
Are you done with it? Are you pleased?
I've been pleased to have not spent any time looking into it over the last week. I felt like it's just it feels like not actually that much has changed since I last saw it. But yeah, 105 mil, if that happens, that is very good work from West Ham. Not that he's not a great player, but 105 mil, I did not expect to see that.
Fair enough. There we have it. Little Man United dig in there at the Arsenal fans. Love it. Guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you later. Bye-bye.